What does Volt, a pan-European party, think about our continent's future? How can we shape the European Union, and how do we respond to new challenges like ongoing conflicts and the AI revolution? In this episode, Damian Boeselager, member of the European Parliament and co-founder of Volt, answers these questions. This is a Forum Europeum interview with Damian Boeselager.
So hello everyone, this is the newest episode of Forum Europeum, and we are continuing our series in which we interview members of the European Parliament. Today we are going to have a discussion with Damian Boeselager from Germany, and he is representing the Pan-European Party, Volt, in the European Parliament. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Our first question would be about your party, Volt itself. So Volt seeks to create a new way of doing politics beyond national borders. How do you envision the future political engagement at the European level? And what steps would you take to expand Volt's visibility and influence across the continent?
So Volt believes that we have already parties that are federal, like a local, regional, national level parties exist. Let's take an example of, let's say, the German conservatives. They have their local chapters, regional chapters, and then the national chapters, and the national party basically has the foundation program. And we just want to do the same, but like include the European level, where then basically you have the different, national chapters, but you also have the European overarching chapter, and we just want to have the foundation program on the European chapter. And why we think this is necessary is because in the end, in European elections, we should be voting for what kind of direction we want. Do we want a more social democratic direction on the European level, or more conservative, or like a more Volt direction on the European level? And this should then define the direction the continent is taking. But instead, in European elections, we now vote for national parties, and actually most often for stuff that they did on the national level. Like, was this party good on the national level or not? If it was not good, we don't vote for it. But this is not how it should be, because then you're basically, punishing or rewarding parties for what they do nationally. But you're not actually rewarding the ones in the European elections that should be rewarded or punished, So I think what we really want to do is give all of us, citizens, basically a better vote on where Europe is going based on the performance of these parties on the European level. And that's why we need European parties.
Our next topic is digital sovereignty. So in your recent speech in the European Parliament, you emphasized the need for European digital sovereignty. So in your view, how can this be achieved, and how should it be primarily market-driven or guided by the European Union itself?
So I think actually a better term than sovereignty, because sovereignty means very different things to different people, is actually resilience. I want, and I think this is a responsibility for European and national leaders, I want our societies and our economy to be resilient. And resilient means that we are not overly dependent on individual, countries or companies, but that we have a functioning system that can, withstand shocks. And the truth is that when you look, for example, at the cloud storage market, which is 80% market share governed by three companies, Microsoft Azure, the Google Cloud services, as well as Amazon Web Services, then it's clear that here we have a very high dependency on actors from one geography. And also just a very few actors. And the same is true for payments. If you look at our payment system, I think 60% of payments now go via Visa and MasterCard. It's just an over-dependence in some areas. And the question is a bit, how do we create more resilient economy and society? And I think I'm a market liberal, so I personally believe that the first measure should always be to ensure sufficient competition in our markets. And that also means that these big players need to make also space for smaller players to come up. And I think that's something we can do. And when it comes to our society, and especially elections, I think we just need to apply the same rules that we have offline also to the online space. And there, I think what we would actually need is a digital Democracy Act, because we have a Digital Services Act, we have a Digital Markets Act, which are safeguarding consumers and innovators, but we do not have yet an act that safeguards elections and citizens.
The next question is connected to digital topics as well. So we live in a so-called post-truth period, and what reforms does Volt advocate to combat disinformation, to protect journalists, and strengthen media and transparency in Europe?
Yeah, I think it would also be part of this Digital Democracy Act. I think the truth is that we have underestimated social media, and especially the sensationalist character that we as human beings just like fall into a chapter. So even without foreign interference, social media, I think, has a polarizing effect just because of how we humans function. And that is something that I think is not addressed sufficiently. And it's not easy to address because you basically need to deal with the fact that we as humans just like extreme positions more, or react more strongly, negatively or positively to extreme positions, which basically thins out the more centrist, moderate voices in our debate. And I think that's harmful in itself and something to look at. And I don't know yet what the best solution would be, but maybe, we need to look at recommender systems and so on. And the algorithms. And the second thing is then the actual active influencing. And here I think we are still very naive. I mean, it's very hard to still find out if a bot network from Uruguay or even real people, from whatever, somewhere, are mass liking certain parties or certain content in an election period in a European country. And that is something that I think we need to be a little less naive about in terms of what kind of interference is happening.
Moving to another topic, geopolitics, especially in the light of the ongoing situation in Iran. How should the European Union work toward a common foreign policy? And should we have a common army as well?
So for the second point, yes, I do think we need a European army. Also, in terms of efficiency, we have 17 different tank systems of the Leopard class. This, in terms of economies of scale, means that we are wasting a lot of money on defense that we could use to build active capabilities. So I think there's an issue there. I think what's true is that Europe is completely irrelevant at the moment for any form of influence in the Middle East. And that is just a fact. And now we have to deal with that fact. And I think we would really benefit from having a coordinated European foreign policy, and not only coordinated, but actually for being able to elect a European government to represent us also on the foreign stage. And I think this is what we should be doing.
Thank you. And how do you respond to concerns about national sovereignty in the field of military, for example?
I think that in the end, Europeans have to ask themselves, what role does each of the levels play? What do we want to have decided on the local level? Probably, the question where the local hospital stands and so on, and maybe local police matters. What do we want to decide regionally? There's some things that maybe make sense to be decided there. What do we want to decide nationally? And that could be also some elements. And then what do we want to have on the European level? I do think that defense should be decided on the European level. And I think that would be very good. And it should be controlled by a parliament that is elected by European parties. Yeah.
Our next question is also connected to defense. So one of the most important issues in Europe right now is the war between Russia and Ukraine. What solutions does Volt propose, and what role should Europe play in resolving the conflict?
At first, it's very important to not frame it as a war between Russia and Ukraine, but as a full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine. So Ukraine is not at war, it's defending itself against an invader that is basically killing Ukrainians on Ukrainian soil. And I think that's a very important distinction. And that's why I think we really need to stand up and help Ukraine. I'm from the budget committee, we always gave Ukraine just enough money, but never money to actually succeed with building up a very, very strong military and so on. So there's, I think, money, which is a big question, even though we gave a lot of money. But if you look at the, budget deficit that Ukraine is currently having and so on, I think there would actually need to be an increase. And the second, we should provide all the, weapon support that is needed to make sure that Ukraine can kick the invader out of its own territory.
Another battleground, I would say, nowadays is artificial intelligence, which is becoming a key global battleground. So, should the European Union actively participate in the global AI race? And if so, how?
I think, AI is both overvalued and undervalued in its importance. I think, look, what we have so far is large language models, and they are quite powerful in their field, but they're also then at some point restricted in their power to an extent again. So at the moment, what we see is a couple of large language models, and the question was, I think, for until half a year ago, whether they just exist as a basically natural monopoly. So basically, once one is existent, the others don't make sense. And this was then pretty quickly questioned by the development of DeepSeek in China, but also by Le Chat in France and Perplexity. So, I mean, there is now like more models, and they become more interesting. And then the second layer is basically how are they going to be how implemented, basically. What is the second layer? And most of the AI innovation in Europe at the moment, to be honest, is rather on the second layer of use cases, using the foundation model to then train it, fine tune it to certain use cases, and that is okay. But so I think what we need is computational power to potentially build our own foundation models and improve them, but also to think about AI in different fields, not only language models, and that includes, for example, industrial data analysis, where I think we have a big advantage because we have a lot of different industries, and they all face different dimensions of issues. Yeah. So I think, of course, we should engage, and one way to do it is actually to do very good competition innovation policy. And here I fear sometimes we misunderstand the basic facts, which is that any innovation benefits from a couple of very simple factors. First, more investment in research and development, so Horizon. Second, access to capital, which means a real capital markets union and tax deductions for venture capital investments for small investors. So to make it more attractive for individuals to also just try to get more into the innovation capital realm. But also thinking about, are we spending all our money on agriculture and cohesion, or should we maybe spend more on innovation? Third, the access to labor, which means you need to have a higher participation of the female workforce. You need to allow for cross-country hiring in Europe. It's very difficult to hire people from a different EU member states if they don't want to move. This is really shitty. And third, a more positive narrative on migration, because if you do not understand that labor migration is one of the key factors for competitiveness, you haven't understood economic theory or economic reality at all. So this is under labor. And then, yes, we have to do something on compliance, which is the next big point. And there, I believe we are completely forgetting the harmonization of the European markets, both for goods and services. It's very difficult to really allow for, the fast registration of goods and services in other member states. There's a lot of barriers still in between the European market. That's stupid and something to fix. Then you look at infrastructure, and here, yes, you need data infrastructure to be able to do it. Actually, also space infrastructure, that's another thing. And then you need competition law to be applied. So these are like very simple things that would help any innovator, and also specifically AI innovators, to thrive. And I think sometimes we make it too complex and say, hey, let's take public money to bet on the best AI company and make them big. I don't think this is how you drive innovation. You drive innovation by increasing the standard, like the basically the location factors and the 6 that I just mentioned. So research and development, capital, labor, compliance costs, infrastructure, and competition law are very clear and easy. And still we're doing not at all enough on each of them.
Next question is about the framework of the European itself. So Walt argues that the European Union runs on an outdated system. So what reforms do you believe are most urgently needed to update Europe?
I think the answer is very simple. allow for the European Parliament to be elected via European parties, and then allow the European Parliament to field the government, to put forward the European government. And then make sure that the European government as an executive is accountable to the European Parliament, is able to act, and cannot be stopped by member states on its own competence. Of course, as soon as it interferes with national competences, the second chamber, whatever you call it, could be a EU Senate or an EU council that is made up of the layer below, so the national governments. This second chamber should be able to make sure that the European Union never takes on competences that are not in his, in its competence, like given by the treaties. But I think what we currently have is that the national level really stops the executive from acting where it has to act decisively. And so, very simply put, I want a parliamentary democracy on the European level, just for the European issues, the stuff that we think we should decide together on the European level.
Our last question is the following. So how do you envision Europe in 10 years? What major changes or progress do you expect or hope to see on the continent?
Here, maybe it's important to share a bit of an insight, but like I never thought that I would be in politics, but then I, founded this party with an Italian guy and a French woman, and I realized something. We very often see ourselves as spectators. We think about, what could be the development? What is my hope? What is my fear about the development? But this is not something or a perspective that I subscribe to now. I think we should understand that we have power to shape what the future looks like. And every listener to your podcast has the power to change that future. And I think we need to feel more empowered about taking action and becoming active, even if it's just on the local level or on the regional or on the national level or on the European level. But we can shape the future, and it's up to us and our generation to make that work. So I don't want to be giving you ideas about what my hope or what my fear is. I think it's for all of us to shape, and then it can go in any direction.
This was our interview with Damian Boeselager. We really appreciate your presence. Actually, because our very first interview was with the Hungarian Volt Party. So thank you once again.